Good morning and welcome back to News Centre. Now, the role of members of parliament can be defined as mainly to represent their constituents in parliament. But this appears not to be very true, as some members of the National Assembly or senators do not speak in parliament at all. A report released by an organisation that monitors parliament shows that some members of parliament have never spoken in the august house. The report also highlights some members of parliament who are very active inside the chambers. Let's take a look at some of the highlights of this report now. And there it is, telling us that 45 members of parliament made less than 10 contributions. This is a report that was based on the period between September 2017 and December 2018. And each of them, remember, still did not speak, but got to bag at least 16 million shillings in salaries and allowances. These are members of parliament elected by Kenyans to represent them on the floor of the House. 45 of them never having made a contribution. But this report also giving credit to those who have performed rather well on the floor there of the National Assembly. Kimani Ichung'wah, who is the Kikuyu Member of Parliament. We also have there Joseph Limo, Kipkelion East, as well as Robert Kipukoso from Endebess. These are some of the best performing members of Parliament according to this report. Some of them there, David Gikaria, we have Chris Wamalwa as well, James Nyikal and TJ Kajwang, some of the most active members of Parliament on the floor of the National Assembly. And remember, the report also focuses on those who are silent members of parliament on the floor of the National Assembly. This is what our conversation will be based on. Justice Kizito there from Shinyalu, Oscar Sudi from Kapseret, and many are quite shocked about this, seeing most of them being newsmakers but appearing in this report as silent members of parliament. James Githua, Alfred Sambu as well, they are from Webuye East. We also have several women representatives who are in this list as well. We'll be discussing some of them. We also have Nyakach, Joshua Adama there, being in the list of silent members of parliament. Samuel Arama from Nakuru East. Alex Kasgei, who is the Gwen member of parliament. Charles Kamuren from Baringo South also following in this list. Some would call it the list of shame, but we'll be discussing this shortly. And silent women members, women representatives there from Garissa, Anab Mohammed, from West Pokot, Lillian Tomitom. We have Kitui, Irene Kasalu, Embuz, James Wanjuki, Jane Wanjuki rather, and Elgel Marakwet, Jane Chebaibai. Interesting, earlier on, one of my colleagues here in studio telling me they were shocked to even find out they have a women representative from their region, because they do not know who that is. So that is the list there. Safia Sheikh from Marsabit, falling among the list of poor contributors. Some who've contributed nearly not enough in the period that the National Assembly or Parliament was under review. We also have the likes of Amina Hassan, Women Rep Marsabit, Taita Taveta Women Rep Lydia Mizigi as well, Asha Mohammed from Mombasa, and Jerusha Mamanyi from Nyamira. All right, so let's bring in Mzalendo Trust's Lois Mwakamba, who is the executive director. This is the organization that carried out this survey. Thank you for joining us on News Centre. Tell us more about this report.
Thank you for having me. And my name is Caroline Gaita. Sorry for that.
I beg your pardon, Caroline. We'll actually be speaking to you in just a moment. Before we do, let's speak to David Sankok, who is he's nominated to Parliament to speak to us about this report as well. Several members of Parliament have been giving their views on this report. Mr. Sankok, many thanks for joining us on News Centre. He joins us by way of phone. Tell us more about this report and what you think about its credibility.
Yeah, one thing is that members of parliament parliament is the third arm of government, and it's a legislative arm of government that is mandated in this country to make laws, and laws are made in parliament. So if you are silent in parliament, I don't know why you are earning a salary, because you are supposed to be a legislative arm of government that makes laws. And laws are made in parliament. They are not made in barazas, in political rallies, or outside there. They are made actually on the floor of the house. Like last week, we had a budget making process, which is very important for this country, because that is where we allocate funds to all other arms of government and to all ministries, departments, agencies, and even to the devolved units. And it is very important and imperative that if you are earning a salary out of taxpayers' money, you must then perform. And you can only perform if you are a member of parliament, if you contribute in the floor of the house. For me, I think the survey is credible. I have not checked it, although like I'm also mentioned as one of the most active members I have seen. And I know myself, I've been there, although recently I've been away in New York. But any member who earns a salary must contribute in the floor of the house. They must make laws. There is no way you can be a reporter and you are not reporting news. There is no way you can be a farmer and you don't visit your farms. If you are a member of parliament,
how
you must be in
often?
parliament.
Let's talk about how often, Dr. Sankok, one should, or how many opportunities are members of parliament given to contribute on the floor of the house? Because this report also puts on the spotlight those who've contributed only 5 times in the span of a year. But they'd still say, well, I represented my people those 5 times. Those were the only times I really had something to say on the floor of the house. How often should a member of parliament contribute on the floor?
You know, if you have contributed less times, it means then you are not part of making laws, because we don't make 5 laws in a whole year. We make several laws, we amend several laws, we pass the budget. It is up to you to attend parliament. You know, there is no way the speaker can know that you want to speak if you don't attend parliament and you don't maybe place your card and press the intervention key, or press the key that you want to talk and something like that. But the less you contribute in the house, the less you have something that you have represented your people, because we are members of parliament. We have constituencies. I represent persons with disabilities. Persons with disability have needs in every aspect of life, and whatever that they will be discussed in the house, if I don't contribute, if I don't put my voice, that means that persons with disability have not been represented. If you have only put your voice 5 times, 3 times, 20, in fact, even 20 times, it's less times, my friend. And in the law-making process, at least, you know, there is something that will touch your people. If you are discussing about infrastructure, you want to say that people from North Horn does not require infrastructure, Lamu does not require infrastructure. They do. Every constituency requires that infrastructure. And it's up to you to make laws that will know that if it is the issue of quota systems, so that those who have been left behind will come up, and even those who have been there, who are not marginalized as per se, will also have to fight for their people. That even if you are not marginalized, we still have some needs of infrastructure. So at the end of the day, if you contribute less, you are not representing your people well. You are not. And let us call a spade, not a big spoon.
Some of those falling in the list of those who haven't uttered a word on the floor of parliament, at least in the period that this survey was undertaken. Interestingly, some of the most vocal politicians outside the house. We see them on TV every day. We see them on the news every day. What does it say about the role of representation that Kenyans are giving to these members of parliament?
My sister, if you are vocal in hotels and in Kamkunjis, it's very different from you yourself. You are a news anchor. You know, you should only be vocal inside that newsroom. But outside, then that is propaganda. You are a legislature. You are supposed to be vocal in parliament. Being vocal outside, you in Sarakasi, ya Abunwasi, that is not part of the process of making law. And Kenyans are not paying you to be in barazas. They are not paying you to be in political rallies. They are paying you to make law, just the way we are paying the judiciary. Judiciary are paid to then solve cases. If they are not in court, if they are not vocal in court, and then they tell us they are vocal outside there, they are vocal in their marketplaces. That does not make sense, because that is not why we are paying them money. That is not why the Kenyans are paying us money. They are paying us money so that we can make laws, and laws are made in parliament. So any other issue of being vocal. But my sister, I know, is also tricky, because in parliament, if you start with English, you must finish with English. If you start with Kiswahili, you must finish with Kiswahili. So sometimes it's a bit tricky if you are that person who likes Sheng so much, you are a member of parliament, who is not confident on yourself that you can actually stick to one lane, maybe English, or stick to Swahili. Probably we'll think in future, maybe to introduce even that they can even speak in Sheng, they can speak in mother tongue, so that they can come and we make laws. Recently the process of budget making process, and actually were very few of us, and it is really demanding for us. It is tiring, because personally, I do not study law. I have to every day study in the night, study about law, so that when I come and make law, I'm relevant. So sometimes I think we should introduce in a system where people can even speak in their mother tongue, as far as then we translate and make good laws for our country. Because sometimes I'm ashamed when we are left, a few of us only contributing the floor of the house. When we are making the process of making budget Wednesday, I spoke almost, I think Thursday, almost 20 times, just a single day, because there was nobody else who was pressing their pertinent issues. We wanted to have this money here. We wanted this money to reach Wanjiko. Sometimes we want to put money to National Gender Inequality Commission, which we know will only be having boardroom meetings. We want that money maybe to be transferred to National Government Affirmative Action Fund, where we'll get sanitary towels for our kids, where we can get bursary for our kids. Surely they should actually be in. And if you are vocal outside.
You raise an interesting issue there, though, of competence, perhaps, in terms of language and understanding the legal composition and the process of drafting laws. That is an interesting conversation. But you are a nominated member of parliament. This report also says, despite being nominated to serve various special interest groups, nominated members of parliament have been quite a big letdown, having done little to push for their agenda. Now, you've been mentioned as some of the most active, but what would you say about the role of nominated members of parliament, this especially coming in the wake of plans to reduce the wage bill and perhaps cut off some positions in the National Assembly?
Personally, I know my role. I represent persons with disabilities, and if I represent persons with disabilities, that is my constituency. My constituency is bigger than any other constituency. Some of these members of parliament represent a constituency of 20,000 people. I represent 6.5 million Kenyans with disabilities. So I have even a bigger responsibility. I have a bigger burden, and I represent them very well. I've been mentioned as most active, and actually I know myself. I've been there in parliament, and I must be there, because in any budget making process, in any legal making process, there must be something that will touch on persons with disabilities. If there is a report on nominees to be vetted in parliament, I must be there to know if there is person with disability represented in those nominees, as per Article 54 of our Constitution, that talk of 5% representation of person with disability in appointive and elective position. And also, I have to be there in parliament to make sure that anything that touches, if it is funds, I also own an increase in National Council for Persons with Disability Fund. I must know what is the stake for access to government procurement opportunity. How will persons with disability be accessed? So for me, when it comes to the bloated wage bill, of course we can reduce representation, because we are overrepresented. Waheshimiwa wamekuwa wengi kuliko raia. That is a true fact. Punda imechoka. We can reduce this number, but as far as you are still there, please represent your constituency. If you are nominated to represent our constituency. Represent. If you are elected to represent our constituency. Represent. If you got for a referendum, we reduce this position. For me, I'm willing even to give up my position of nominated. If you feel that a person with disability will be represented by members of parliament elected in a particular constituency, well and good for me. But as far as I'm earning a salary, I'll work for that salary. I will not earn a salary without doing the job that I'm being paid for by Kenyans.
Right. Many thanks for speaking to us, and congratulations for being in good books in this report. That is nominated Member of Parliament David Sankok. They're speaking to us about the first scorecard for the 12th Parliament released by Mzalendo Trust. In studio with us, Caroline Gaita, the Executive Director for Mzalendo Trust. Many thanks for joining us this morning.
Michelle,
Mzalendo Trust has been releasing this scorecard since 2014, I believe.
Yes.
What
But this is the
trends?
first for Parliament.
Absolutely.
Yes.
What trends have been seen so far?
I think the difference between this scorecard and the past is that you've seen the number of zeros reduced, for example. In the previous scorecard, it was more than 20. In this case, for example, the women's rep, it was down to 6. For the elected members, that has gone down. So there's an improvement. I think there's a recognition that yes, and I love what Dr. Sankok has said, that we take you to the House to represent interests, your electorates, your special groups, and these interests can only be represented on the floor of the House. So yes, there's a shift.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how really is the survey carried out? Because many are concerned about, perhaps the credibility. Because many would say, I see my member of parliament on TV every day. How could he be the least performing member of parliament on the floor of the House?
So the survey is based on Hansard. The role of the MP on the floor of the House, or yes, the role of the MP on the floor of the House. So what we do is we take the open data, in this case the Hansard, and using a speech data count, we calculate the number of times that you contributed to anything on the floor of the House. So it's not based on what you do outside the House. It's not based on the conversations that you have outside the House. It's based on the Hansard. And for us, we only use the official Hansard from Parliament. So we trust that Hansard captures the contributions of the members completely.
So in that list, 10 members of Parliament having not uttered a single word. There's several of them having uttered a word on the floor maybe 5 times, some maybe 3 times. What does this mean for Kenyans? What questions do we need to be asking ourselves now?
We start from the fact that the MPs represent our issues in the House. The Constitution is very clear that they represent the legislative role, they have the representation role, and they have the oversight role. Having said that, once we elect you to the House, we elect you on the basis of either some promises you made, some expectations from us. So when you go to the House and you say nothing, that is really disappointing. It means the people who took you to that House, you absolutely have nothing to say in regard to the reason they took you to the House. And for us, I think that should be reason for citizens to start asking themselves the questions arising out of whether the MPs actually, some of these silent MPs, understand their role or reason for being in Parliament. Yes. I've seen comments that, some have argued that being outside the House, they are contributing, which is okay, but what we are saying, your role as captured in the Constitution is in the floor of the House. So if you go to Parliament and you say nothing, what does that tell us?
Right. Yeah. And other than do members of Parliament understand their role, do Kenyans understand the role of their members of Parliament when they elect them to these positions? I'm looking at the infographic you used here, and just asking Kenyans, what is the job of a member of Parliament? Do Kenyans understand these positions and these roles?
From past studies, we see there's a disconnect between what people expect of their MPs and what the Constitution provides as a role of the MPs. We've seen cases where the demands on MPs are more of the social nature, money, fundraising, and you've seen even the MPs themselves complain about the demands that the citizens place on themselves. And for us, doing the scorecard is actually one of the ways we feel is an avenue for enlightening the citizens on the roles that Parliament is expected to play, and it's on those roles that citizens should hold them accountable. And so for us, even for the MPs, the scorecard is a good tool for them to remind or to engage with their citizens, with their constituents, and say, look, when you elected me to represent your interests in the House, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is what I'm supposed to do, and it's on the basis of these that you should hold me to account.
All right.
Yeah.
Honorable David Sankok brings in an interesting issue. You know, when we're speaking on phone, he says, you know, when you start an issue in English, you have to finish in English. When you start in Swahili, you have to finish in Swahili. And it sounds little, but if our members of parliament cannot carry out a single line of thought in a particular, you know, language, English, or the official language, then what does that mean about the credentials that we should be looking into before putting someone in these positions? And it is a complex process of drafting laws as it is.
We as Kenyans chose the sort of credentials or criteria on which our elected members would go to the House. Being conversant with English, for example, is not a prerequisite for making laws. And I think I would flip that to ask if there's a way that then they are able to understand or to articulate their issues in a manner that they are comfortable with. And I think that's what Dr. Sankok was trying to say, that look, if I start a conversation in English, can I at some point explain it in Kiswahili?
Right.
But having said that, I think those would be issues that the House would have to consider, you know, in terms of how do they make sure that everybody is able to contribute and that language is not a barrier to the contributions of the House. But back to us, we understand what the MP is supposed to do. We understand the complexity of making laws. So it's back to us then as citizens to then decide, do we want to elect people who cannot make laws for us when we have a pool of, you know, qualified people that can make those laws?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And many, especially, you know, during election period, are telling Kenyans it's important to look at someone's development record, someone's development agenda, someone's experience in the period they have already been in that position. How do you think such reports could influence Kenyans' decision-making moving forward?
Kenyans are, at least judging from our website, you can see that citizens, especially on our website, the age group between 29 and 39 and 20 to 29 is the key group that takes a key interest in what their MPs are doing, which means there is an awakening. Citizens are starting to ask or to question what their members of parliament and other elected leaders or the executive are doing. And so for us, this report is a way to start conversation, to highlight what citizens expect and what the MPs are doing. And so we believe that this is a key tool of enhancing citizen participation, encouraging citizen engagement, for example, with Parliament and the legislature, and also just making Parliament or members of Parliament more accountable to the people who elected them to the House. Yes.
And this comes amidst several conversations in the country. One of them is the wage bill and how we can reduce the bloated wage bill. There's been a conversation whether we should have a referendum, scrap off some positions. And, you know, just looking at this report, there are groups of, you know, state officers who seem not to be doing much with their position. Would you say this could inform then such decisions as where to scrap and where to cut off what?
What from the conversation about the wage bill, one of the things that keeps coming up is, I would say, value for money.
Right.
Are the MPs doing, or are we paying them? Is the pay that they are being paid commensurate with the work that they are doing? And so as we start conversations around constitutional reforms or the referendum, for me, I don't think the issue is so much the positions, but holding the people in those positions accountable to the roles that they're supposed to play. Because even if we were to reduce the positions, for example, and the people in those positions are not doing what they're supposed to do, or they're not accountable to the citizens, then we won't have won or changed anything. Yes.
There's several categories here: silent members of parliament, most active members of parliament, but the report also focused on youth members of parliament, because we've been speaking of perhaps having a young demographic or a young crop of legislators representing us in parliament. Talk to us about how this group did.
So from the analysis, the young MPs, especially the new members of parliament, did not do very well. If you look at the top scorers, you have Honorable Sakaja, you have Honorable Lesuda, who've been in the House before. So it could be a case of, for example, lack of experience. It could be a case of lack of opportunity, but overall, they didn't do very well. Yeah. And so that begs the question whether it is lack of opportunity in the House, lack of knowledge in how the House runs, or just fear.
All right.
Yeah.
Several issues here still we're meant to discuss. Two-thirds gender rule yet to pass. Many say, the women already in parliament are not doing as much, or they're not supporting the movement themselves. We'll be coming back with this conversation. That is Caroline Gaita, Executive Director, Mzalendo Trust, which has just released the first scorecard for the 12th Parliament. Interesting results in this report. We'll continue discussing this after this short break.